ba 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 ba. So today we're going to be talking about blues riffs, which sounds kind of specific given all the different foundation stuff we've been working on, but the blues is just a really good way to start to learn how to do things like solo and kind of play individual melody lines and give a little bit more of an improv feel to it. And so we're going to be learning a few different riffs that I've tabbed out. If you're watching this as a recording, there should be a link down below that you can download this tab. But basically the goal with today is to learn how these sort of riffs are kind of made and how, more importantly, you can make your own when you're practicing with this. So the riffs are of a few different skill levels, so keep that in mind as you're working on it. If the last one seems way too hard, it's okay to focus on the earlier ones. And also remember that if you play these riffs all wrong, but it sounds good, then are you really doing them wrong, right? That's why this is such a cool thing to be working with. But to start here, what we're going to be thinking about are some of the things we've worked on in earlier episodes of this quarter. One of those things is going to be some of the embellishments. We talked about hammer-ons, we talked about slides, and we talked about pull-offs. And these techniques are going to be utilized in today's session. So if you haven't looked at those videos before, be sure to check them out. We'll kind of do a little mini breakdown as we go through, but those will really help. The other thing is that I'm going to be using what's called my melodic picking technique, which means with my playing hand, the one that strums and picks, I'm going to be using my thumb to pluck the strings. And we're going to be playing off our C, E, and A strings today. So we got to be really comfortable plucking each one of these strings sort of individually with the thumb using that technique we've talked about before. But let's go ahead and dive into it. And before I set up a screen share to show you the tab, I first want to just show you what I call the pocket that we're playing in. So we're not going to worry about music theory yet. We're going to be working on that in our next session, talking about why some of this stuff works. Today it's just about playing. And this is my favorite pocket to play in for an A blues. And a pocket is basically just a little position of notes. And normally when you play a scale, you start and end on the note that the scale is named after. But when you're playing kind of a pocket of notes, that doesn't really happen. So don't worry too much about the why here. Just worry more about having some fun with it, because it's not that hard. We're going to start by taking our index finger, placing on the 2nd fret of the C string. We're going to play that. Then we're going to take our ring finger, place it on the 4th fret of the C string, and play that. Now we're going to cross. And what this means is, you see how right now we've got these two on 2 and 4, right? Well, we're going to take this index finger and we're going to slide it up to 3 on the E string and play that index finger, 3rd fret on the E string. And when you do that, it's okay to take your ring finger off the previous one. And then we're going to play 5 on the E string with the ring finger. And then we're going to play 3 on the A string, so move your index finger down there. And then we're going to play 5 on the A string with the ring finger. And this is that pocket I just mentioned. All that it is 2 and 4 on the C string, 3 and 5 on the E string. Remember to cross that index finger over so it goes to the 3, and 3 and 5 on the A string. And when you listen to this, it doesn't really sound like much, right? It can be tough to play up and down quickly, right? When you're going back down, if you play the 4 on the C with your middle finger, it's okay to then stretch down to 2 with the index. I know that's kind of confusing, but as you get comfortable with it, you can kind of try different things. But the gist of it is just 2, 4 on the C, 3, 5 on the E, and 3, 5 on the A. And if you fret it differently than I am here, it's really not a big deal right now. Just try to work towards that stuff I talked about. But just with this little itty bitty area, we're just playing 6 notes, right? 2 notes on 3 strings. We can do a ton of different stuff when it comes to soloing and creating that really cool sound. And so what I have here is on my phone, I just pulled up in this YouTube video. It's called Straight Blues in A Backing Track. It's got 1 million views. So it's going to get a few more million after we do this, right? But when I click play on this, all that it is a blues track in the key of A. Right? So you can hear just my phone is playing it, right? Kind of neat. Well, I'm just going to play these notes over this, all right? And what you'll notice is every single one of these notes sounds good. So you can feel free to play along too and try any of these notes as you go through. So I'm just going to go straight up and down, and it'll sound something like this. Now I'm going pretty fast through this, right? So it's totally fine to go much slower and go something like this. Whatever order, it doesn't matter. Kind of cool, right? Every note sounds good. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use kind of some random orders of these notes, right? Might do something like this. Now it's starting to really sound like a solo, right? I'm not playing anything outside of these notes, but obviously I'm doing some things to make it sound more musical, more solo-like, right? So what are those things? And really what we want to do is whenever we're playing solos, we want to think of three main things, right? These three things, first one is simplicity. Making things really easy is a really good way to make your solo sound really good. If you just go fast and crazy the whole way through, it actually gets really boring. It's like too much of a good thing. Keeping it really simple and only playing maybe even a few notes can really make making your solo more musical, more approachable, because you're not trying to think of how many different things can I do. Heck, you could make a solo sound good with only 2 notes if you do all the right steps in it, which I'll show you here in a moment. But that first step is keeping it simple, right? The second step is repetition. Music works best when it's familiar. So if you play something, play it again, and then again, and maybe another time. The blues without repetition doesn't exist. That's what the blues is. It's going through these processes again and again, playing the same sort of line over and over. So if you have a really simple line and you play it over and over, you're going to be off to the races with a good solo. But there's one more thing that's really important, and this is the most important one that we all forget, and that is space. The notes that you don't play are just as important as the ones you do. So when you play something on your ukulele, you want to allow it to breathe sometimes. Give it some space before you play the next thing. You don't have to play a note every moment of every moment. You can just let it ring a little bit. But if I take these 3 things in mind, I do something simple, I do something repetitive, so I repeat it, and I give it space, I can get some really, really cool sounds. Today we're going to be working on some riffs that give you these sounds, that give you all of these different things. But just to show you how simple it can be, I'm going to play a riff right now. My riff is going to be this simple. It's going to be 5 on the A, 3 on the A, and 5 on the E. That's it. I'm just going to go and go ahead and listen to it a couple times. All right. Now notice what I do here. I play something simple, only 3 notes, right? I play it again. And I also give it space in between, right? I'm not going over and over. I'm giving it that space in between to make that sound. So could I make just those 3 notes sound good using these concepts? Well, you tell me. I'm going to start over this backing track just for the fun of it. And it sounds something like this with just a simple 3-note solo. Maybe a little variation. Pretty cool, isn't it? I only played 3 notes and yet it sounds musical. The reason is it sounds more like I have something to say rather than something like this, which this doesn't sound very good, I think. It's just, I'm doing a lot more notes. It's a lot harder, right? But it's like, yeah, it's too much, right? It doesn't sound like it has a purpose to it, right? So as we're learning these riffs today, I just want you to be thinking of these things. I want you to be thinking of doing things simply, giving things space, and repeating things as you're going through, because that's really what's going to sound great. B.B. King is one of my favorite blues soloists. When you listen to him, he really does these three things very, very well. A lot of it's not that hard or complicated, but it's got that soul behind it because he has something to say. The last little analogy I'll make to it is a lot like talking. You know, if you think about a really fast solo that just is nonstop, that would be a lot like if somebody just started talking and they didn't stop talking, they never took a breath or anything, and they just kept going and going and going and going, and they never stopped for you to make an effort to think about anything they said because they just keep going and going and going. It gets really annoying, and you're probably all really annoyed right now because I'm not really making much of a point when I just keep talking like that, right? But if you stop, that brings attention to whatever it is you're saying, and you can really drive it home. Same sort of deal with a solo. So space, very, very key. But let's go ahead and take a look at essentially these 4 riffs that we're going to be working on that show these kind of concepts to an extent. The first riff is very busy, and that's mostly because it's a way that you can look at this little pocket that I was talking about. So I'm going to start a screen share right now on this so that you guys can see what this looks like. So it should be something like that. If you could see this, if you wouldn't mind giving me a thumbs up just to make sure that you guys can see what's being shown here. Awesome. So this first riff here that I have highlighted, you'll notice this is just what we practice to start. It's less of a riff and more of the guideline of where we're at. We're going to play that 2 and then that 4, which you can see this 2 here and this 4 here being the 2 and the 4 on the C string with the tab. And then you can see it goes 3 and 5 on the E string, and then 3, 5 on the A string. That's what we just learned, right? But then it has a little ending here. It just goes 3 down to 5. And if you play that kind of as a riff, it's a little bit busy, but it's not too difficult overall, right? And what's cool about it is it kind of gives you all of the different notes that you're going to be playing around with this. And it's really helpful to see all of those as you're playing. So the first one, works fine. And, if we play it along with that backing track, it's going to sound just fine as well. Sounds something like this. This is pretty quick right now, but you can hear that sound. I could do it half the speed too, right? I could do it a quarter of the speed if I wanted to, right? Where it's just going. And what's cool is these notes all just work, don't they? Kind of neat. So the first riff, just kind of a rehashing of some of the concepts we started talking about today, but a good one to get really comfortable with. The second riff starts to get a little bit more confusing, especially if you don't read music. Now, if you do read music, that's going to be very helpful right now, but it's not required at all. What you see here, this little symbol that I'm highlighting, you see how it's this little weird squiggly, looks like a pen air or something like that, like somebody scribbled something out. That's called a rest. And the value of this rest is half of the beat. And if you don't know how to read music, again, this is okay, because this is more about internalizing these concepts more than it is being exact to them. What this is trying to tell you to do, the second riff, is it's trying to tell you to start with space. It's trying to tell you, pause. Don't play a note right at the beginning. Take a moment, just a moment to stop, and then go through with what happens. So we're not going to play at the very beginning. And then we're going to play this 2, and we're going to slide that 2 to 4. Now, when we do this slide here, this builds off of the techniques we worked on earlier in this quarter. What I want you to do, though, is I want you to use your middle finger to play this 2 and slide to this 4 on the C string, because it sets up what's next. So you play that 2, and we slide it up to 4 on the C. And that's a cool sound, isn't it? Remember, if you've worked on slides before but still might get this sort of sound, like it goes away, remember, increase the pressure ever so slightly as you're moving that middle finger up, and that usually can help hold the tone a little bit more as you're going through. So we're going to do that slide, 2 to 4, and then we're going to play 3 on the E string with our index finger. Now, really important here, as you'll see we play that 3 on the E. We're using our index finger just like we did when we played the 3 on the E earlier. But then there's another rest, and the reason for this is space. We're trying to give space to what we're playing. So after I play that 3 on the E, I'm going to take this finger off so that the note stops ringing. And when I say off, I don't mean off like this. I mean just release the pressure so that note stops. So it has this sort of feel like this, where it's like you get this nice little offbeat feel. And you can do different rhythms with it, right? Again, the rhythm that's written here shows you one way of playing it. And it sounds like this if we make the computer play it, which is kind of cool that we can do that, right? You can hear it kind of starts off, right? It starts with the and goes in. But if you do the rhythm a little bit differently, like maybe you rush the slide, that's totally fine as long as you're getting the space at the beginning through this rest, as well as some space in the middle of this rest by stopping the ringing. We don't want this, where that keeps ringing, and then we play the last note, which is the 5 on the E string, which is our ring finger right there. That space is what makes this sound. Now, the other thing that goes with this is if you look at the tab, there are these little repeat markers. And I put these on most of these riffs because repetition is good, right? So this one's relatively simple. I wouldn't say this is really easy to play. It takes some practice, but it's relatively simple. It's only a few notes. And then it uses space by having the rest both at the beginning and the middle. And then the repetition is playing it again and again. And if we have the computer play it, it sounds something like this. You hear that kind of nice sound, right? And more importantly, if we take it and we put it back to that backing track, it might sound something like this for reference. It doesn't even matter where you jump in on the track. Even though there are different chords, blues just sounds good everywhere when you're starting this stuff. You can hear I'm changing the rhythm, I'm doing different things because again, it's all about starting to get some of that feel and playing around with it, but you can play it as listed too for that sort of feel. It's pretty cool when you start to realize that just playing something simple like this and repeating it can really start to give you this cool full solo type of sound. Now we're going to go on to the third riff here, which I actually think is easier, despite there being more notes. I think that the space in that earlier one makes it a little bit tricky when you're first practicing it. But this one, the third riff here, is going to be 5 on the A string, so we're going to use our ring finger there. And then we're going to pull off to 3 on the A. Then we're going to play 5 on the E with our ring finger. We're going to pull off to 3 on the E. That's a tricky one, right? Doing these pull-offs. Remember, as we talked about before, you want to physically pluck the string with your finger. It's not so hard to do on the A string. I mean, it's still hard, but it's not as hard to do on the A string as it is on the E string. What you want to make sure you do with the E string is that you're actually fretting that 3 on the E, and you're kind of touching the A string with your index finger, so that when you do the pull-off, if you accidentally hit the A string, it just sort of deadens. And this might be too challenging, and if it is, it's totally fine to just play 5 and 3. As I mentioned before, these riffs go through a lot of different skill levels, so if this feels really, really hard, it's okay to skip the pull-off on that second one. Just play the 5 and the 3. But the first couple notes of this, just the part that's highlighted here, goes something like this. And then the end of it, it goes 5 and 3 again, but this time, it's a slide. And what's cool about that is you're going to play the 5 with the ring finger, and then you're just going to slide it down to 3. So the whole riff sounds something like this. You hear how that's got this cool kind of bouncing feel, right? The space then is created by the end. This note is worth more in terms of beats than any other note. In fact, it's worth 3 times as many as any of one of these other beats. So we have space kind of at the end of this measure that's kind of created. So it sounds like this. And we repeat it again and again. It sounds pretty good. We put it to that backing track. This one's pretty nice, right? And you can try it at different points in rhythm. That's really fast, right? What if I do it slower? What if I do something like this, where it goes... It still works. How cool is that, right? And what's really fun about these riffs is when we start to combine them. So I'm going to do now a combination of these riffs. I'm just going to use the second and the third riff so that you can hear it. Nice, isn't it? Right? Like, I literally just played these two riffs, and I played one of them once, another one twice, another one twice, another one twice, kind of just mixing it up, repeating things, giving that sort of space, and it sounds like I know what I'm doing, right? Which is kind of cool, because soloing is really quite tricky. But when you just have these little riffs or these canned licks that use, again, simplicity, repetition, and space, it becomes a lot easier to try to start creating a solo. And that's what these are designed to do. You can also incorporate the first part as well, right? Sweet is that? Now, it still takes practice to do this, right? It's still not... one of the things that drives me nuts about soloing is people that know how to solo can make it look really easy, and that's really frustrating when you're sitting there trying to practice. It's like, I can't get two notes sounding good. And that's a normal process with it. It just takes that practice and that kind of beating your head against the wall a little bit to finally get it to click. But these riffs really can provide something consistent that gives you a really good sound right away, right? And so that's the first three riffs now being used. The last riff is a bit of a doozy, and putting this into everything else can be pretty challenging too, but it's so much fun. It sounds so cool. So what's going on here? Well, the first three notes are what are called triplet eighth notes. Now, if you know how to read this, great. If not, don't worry, just think faster notes. The first three notes are going to be much faster than others. And you'll notice we're kind of breaking the form a little bit. We're not starting on 5, we're now starting on 6. And we're going to use our pinky finger there. So we're going to play pinky on fret 6 of the A string. It's like, ooh, where'd that note come from? This is called the blue note. We'll learn more about this note in our next session. But I'm going to play that, and I'm going to pull off to 5 on the A. Oh, that's so hard. My pinky finger has to do the pull off? That's really difficult, but really worth practicing. And then I'm going to do a pull off to 3 on the A. This is called a double pull off. You notice we only play the 6, and we immediately pull off to the 5 and pull off to the 3. And then after that, we're going to play the 5 on the A immediately afterwards. So because these 3 notes are all really short, it means the time into the 5 is also short. The 5 is the first note that you hold a little bit longer, but that doesn't mean that the interval of time into the 5 is longer. So it sounds something like this. And man, how cool is that, right? You could just do that. Now this takes a lot of practice, and if you were struggling with some of the earlier ones, this one might feel unapproachable right now, and that's okay. Something that you can kind of work towards as you're working on these tabs and such. But just getting that comfortable. 6, 5, 3, 5. And then what we do to kind of finish it off is we do something similar to earlier. We're playing the 5, we're going to pull off to 3. Then we're going to play 5 on the E, pull off to 3. And then we play 5 on the E to finish the whole thing. So the whole thing sounds something like this when you play it through, and it's a doozy, but man, listen to this. Isn't that cool? Isn't that nuts, right? How nice that sound is for only a few notes, right? More notes than earlier parts in the solos, for sure. This is by far the most advanced of these, but really cool, thick, interesting sounds being created with the same kind of collection of notes with one little add-on here with the 6. And just like the other ones, when you play this with that sort of backing track, it just sounds good. Now, if I just play it again and again and again, it might get boring, but what if I intermix it? What if I go back and forth between like the 3rd and the 4th? Right? It starts to sound really nice. Now, as I do just those 2, what's the problem with this? Well, it doesn't have a lot of space to it, right? You know, it's really busy. So that's where maybe we use like the 2nd one a little bit. And we throw that 2nd one in there too, and now we have this opportunity for space. Really cool, right? I'm just kind of mixing them up in different ways, and I know I'm looking at making it look much easier than it actually is to do. That's just because I've played around with this stuff so much. And to give you a little story to make you feel better if this is very challenging for you, I learned soloing stuff in college. I took a jazz workshop course, and I brought my ukulele to it, which was a little interesting, right? Because I was the only ukulele player, safe to say. And I remember we were learning how to solo. And we'd learn a song, right? Something like Autumn Leaves or something jazzy, right? Fly Me the Moon, whatever it was, a basic jazz standard. And I remember the teacher would be like, all right, take a solo, Matt. And I'd be like, what? I don't know what to do. And then he'd say something like, oh, just play the melody then and play off of that. So I'd just play the melody super rigidly like a robot. And then I'd be like, I don't know what to do. What should I do? And he'd say something like, oh, well, you know, go learn your Dorian scale or whatever thing to learn, right? So I'd go home and start sitting there and I'd practice my Dorian scale and be like, okay, all right, good enough. You know, I'm ready. And then I'd, you know, start practicing with a backing track or something like that. And it wouldn't sound good immediately. So I think, oh, I don't know enough. That's why my solo isn't good. It's because I don't know enough yet, right? So I go back next day to class and I'd be like, hey, I worked on the Dorian scale, but I'm still not getting good sound. What else do I need to do? And he'd say something like, oh, learn the 3rds and 7s of the chords. What he's telling me to do doesn't matter for the story, but bear with me. And so I go home and I practice the 3rds and 7s. And I'd be like, okay, click on the backing track. Didn't sound good right away. Thought, I'm not doing enough. Rinse and repeat this over the course of a week before the teacher finally was like, dude, you just need to go practice. Like, go suck and you'll get better. And I didn't even realize, like, oh, yeah, like there's no way to just learn these concepts and make them sound good immediately. If that were the case, then everyone would do it, right? So it's really critical as we're working on these to just get really comfortable with getting uncomfortable, trying these different situations, trying to play them in different ways so that we can start to figure out what works for us and figure out how we can make musical sounds. It could be that you only get 2 notes that sound good and you're trying to play 16. But man, the next time you play, you might be able to get that 3rd note in there and build off of that as you go through. So if this is really challenging at first and you feel like, man, I can't make it sound good, it's okay to make it sound real bad at first and gradually, you know, work at it and try to improve. And just using these notes, you can make really great solos. In fact, if somebody asked me to solo in an A blues, I would use riffs like this and this little pocket in this little area, and you can do a whole lot with it. And truthfully, soloing is one of my weakest areas of playing because I don't practice it enough. But every time I do, I always love it. And to kind of show you with this, putting on that backing track, I'm only going to play in this zone, just using the riffs that we worked on and these notes. I'm not going to go up or down the fretboard anymore, and it can sound something like this. that solo was kind of cool, right? You know, like it just sounded bluesy and nice. And really what I was doing is I was playing off of these riffs, do little alterations to the riff, start them a little earlier, play them a little later or whatever. And the things I was really keeping in mind the whole time was simple, right? You heard me do this how many times? I did that a ton of times. I repeated it. And I give it space naturally by doing this, right? By not going, that's just too much. And with that comes the fourth concept that really is most important when you get comfortable with this stuff. Once you really start to understand how all these things interact, and that is variation. So when you have something simple that you're repeating and is giving space, then you add a little variation to it, and then the magic can happen. For instance, maybe the variation's this. Here's my normal. Here's my variation. All I did was play the 3 on the E a second time instead of going up to the 5 on the E. And it added so much, didn't it, right? Really cool, thick, interesting sound, right? Now, in our next session, we're going to talk a lot more about some of the theory behind this. We're going to be learning a couple of what we call pentatonic scales and kind of learn how to make pockets like this. And we're going to talk a little bit more about soloing and some tips to make your solos even richer. But right now, just kind of have fun with trying to solo and trying to figure out little pieces as you're going through. And all that we're doing right now is a blues in A. So if you go on YouTube or anything else and you just type in blues in A, there'll be slow blues, fast blues, it doesn't matter. You can work with any of them, and it just gives you an opportunity to start trying some of these concepts and having some fun with it. So I'm going to open it for any questions you guys might have now with these different concepts and soloing. To me, this is honestly like the most stressful thing to learn because I remember being so overwhelmed. But just stick with it, suck a little bit, that's okay, we all did. And yeah, any questions at all working with this? Doesn't look like any questions there. Oh, there's a message though. Oh, there's a couple messages. I missed the first one, I'm sorry. So the first one is, Matt, can you show a close-up of your left hand for the last riff with the triplet? Absolutely. Yeah, it was zoomed in on the tab there. So the last one with the triplet there, what's going to happen is the pinky is here on the A string, and then the ring is here on the 5 on the A, and the index is here on the 3. And I actually have all 3 placed in position. And I get comfortable doing a double pull-off. So I play it once, pull off to the 5 on the A. That's hard. The pinky doesn't like doing this. And then you do another pull off to the 3 on the A. So that's the trick to that one. Once you get the triplet though, you'll notice that this is the same as what we did in the third riff, right? So pretty cool. And then another message here that says, thanks and happy anniversary. Thank you so much. Yeah, that's why we don't have a class next week. It's my wife's and I 10-year anniversary, wedding anniversary, which is wild. But we'll be back at it on July 22nd. And then we'll be making an announcement soon for when the next quarter will be starting. It will be in September, it looks like, as my kid starts up school. We'll kind of be syncing up schedules with his. And that also means that we're going to be changing the day that these classes are offered because I'm going to be doing it while my son is at school. So more information of that to come shortly. But as always, if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out anytime. And I'll look forward to seeing you at the next one of these sessions. The next one being July 22nd, where we will learn pentatonic scales and kind of wrap this up. But thank you guys so much. Have a wonderful weekend, and I'll talk to you soon. See ya. La 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 la.